Okay, so this is a visual graphic of starting at 0 and getting to 100. I'm going to mute everyone. If you want to jump in, just unmute yourself. Let me, okay, mute all. All right. So, I'm gonna kind of talk through each of them first, and then I have a printout. We're gonna just have a little bit of a discussion about each step, and then at the end, West or Michael, if you just want to look at the chat bar, we'll answer any questions that come up at the end. So we're starting here at 0, assuming kind of 0 is the very beginning. This isn't prospecting. This is now once we're with a family. So we start here. I'm gonna run through these quickly and then review them each individually. So we have the warm up. We then have a value statement, which is the introduction of the personal wishes organizer. We then have the referral introduction, the 4 questions, the umbrella of protection, message to my loved ones, vital statistic, pick a few pages that you're going to review in the personal wishes organizer, the easy way, hard way page, the pie chart, cost estimate, then the close for asking for the money, paperwork, referrals, and warm down. So I'm going to show you now just a breakdown of each step. So we're going to start here. This is kind of the progression of an effective presentation. So we've talked a little bit about this in the past, and most of you know, we asked this a couple weeks ago. On a warm-up, how long should it take? The answer is as long as it takes. Generally speaking, 5 to 10 minutes is sufficient. If you are in the house and within 3 to 4 minutes talking about money, I can tell you, you did not spend enough time in the warm-up. Conversely, if you're spending 30 to 40 minutes talking about their grandkids and their softball leagues and where they lived and where they were born, and you haven't discussed anything about your purpose there, you might be going a little too far out into the weeds. So just be aware of a balance there. What is the purpose of the warm-up? So obviously here, the goal is to start to build some level of trust and rapport. You're not going to build enough trust in that first 5 to 10 minutes to ask for a sale, but we're earning the right to continue to build more trust. So they have to know that our intentions are pure and we're there to help them. And it's important that we try to get to know them. So it's okay to discuss some pieces about funeral related topics. It doesn't mean that you only can talk about them and their families, but it's important to bring it back to them and back to their families and what's important to them during this warm-up period. A lot of people, and I did this when I first started, I would just ask for permission. Is it okay if I just take notes as we get started? It lets them know that you're interested in what they're saying and that it's important to you. So if they make a note that they have 17 grandchildren or they have a blended family, she has 7 kids, he has 2, you can write those things down. Just the act of writing it down helps it stick in your mind. I also sometimes was bad at remembering names, so I would just write their names down to start with. Then I wouldn't forget who I was talking to. I won't ask who else that happens to because I don't want anyone to admit it, but have you ever been in an appointment and you forget one of their names and you have to go, oh, what was their name? So I'm sure it's just me. Take notes and then listen more than you talk. Be very aware of this. If they start to discuss some piece of their family or their life or why they decided to meet with you, and you're really excited about what they shared, so you're excited to now share your thoughts about that, sometimes that enthusiasm is you interrupting them, and that can put them off. So just be very, very aware that you're not interrupting them. And then just the importance of mirroring. So, I tend to be upbeat and a little bit loud, and I speak quickly. So if I have a family or if I met with an older gentleman and I walk in, hey, Fred, good to meet you. How are you? He's going to be probably pretty annoyed. He's not going to want to talk to me because he's more subdued and he's quieter. So you have to be aware of their energy and matching their energy and their body language and their tone. If they speak very slowly, you need to speak more slowly. If they speak more upbeat and they're talking quickly, then maybe try to match that. But just be aware of those little things. And by the way, that's with anything in life, just in general, people will be more willing to open up to you. So that's the warm-up. The value statement now is the transition from the warm-up to the personal wishes organizer. So as we have the book, as we have our personal wishes organizer, we're holding this, and I love what Travis does. He actually physically holds it close to his chest, if you can see this here, which is a subconscious way of showing them how important it is to you by holding it. You never, ever, ever want to give this book to the family. you won't get it back, and they're now not going to listen to anything you say, because they're going to be reading through the book. So you want to hold the book. So this is the value statement. It is not important that this is verbatim, but it has to be a value statement that's important for you. So I'm just going to read this value statement. So I'm very excited to show you the personal wishes organizer that I promised when we spoke on the phone. Bob and Mary, these planning guides are the first step in making decisions for yourselves so that you and your family will know what you want for final arrangement, removing that emotional and financial burden from them. Families who have used this book and filled them out have told us they're one of the most important and helpful tools they could have ever received. Bob and Mary, may I ask you, why did you agree to meet with me today, and what are you both hoping to accomplish during our time together? And then pause and let it sit for a minute. So West has sent out those 10 emotional questions. If you don't have those, we can resend them, but that's one of those questions, and this is a really great place to put that question. So Bob and Mary, if you don't mind me asking, I'm thrilled that we finally were able to get together. What are you both hoping to accomplish during our time together? There's no wrong answer here. They could say we're just trying to get information. He could say, she told me if I didn't finally meet with you, I'm sleeping on the couch. They could say, we just want to get everything done. We have the money, we're ready to go. So you'll get a sense of where they are. But that's a very powerful question to ask, and it'll let you know where they are in their head. Kind of a good framework there. That's the value statement. This is now the referral introduction. It's important, just like using assumptive language, it's important that we discuss the concepts of referrals before the very end. So a great line here, and this is in the training manual. Bob and Mary, when we get done going through these books, you're going to see incredible personal value that they are to you and your family. In fact, most families end up asking how they can get extra copies for other friends and family members. I promise when we're done here today, I'll take a few minutes and give you the opportunity to order additional books for your loved ones. Sound fair? And now they're kind of thinking through, who else do they know that might want a book? Not who do you know that would want to buy, who's interested in pre-planning. It's just who else would be interested in ordering the free personal wishes organizer. That's it. You're just planting a seed. You don't need to have a big, long conversation at this point. Just discuss and plant the idea of a referral. Now, the 4 questions are so important. We talk about, there's a lot of things you don't need to memorize. These 4 questions I would memorize. They do not have to be in this exact order, and frankly, they don't even have to be in this exact place, but they have to be before you start in the book. So they might come up in the warm-up, and that's okay. So the first question is, have the 2 of you ever taken the time to discuss what you would want for your funeral arrangements if one of you had died unexpectedly? And just let them speak. Usually, this is where they'll start to open up. This is where it becomes very important that you built a relationship of trust over the phone and in the warm-up. This is something likely they've never talked about with anyone other than themselves. They, a lot of times, won't even talk to their kids. They're not talking to their neighbors, maybe a church leader, but it's not something, people don't go to dinner parties and talk about what they want for their funeral. So you're asking them to open up about something that's pretty sacred to them, and you have to have earned the right to ask that. That's why it's important that the warm-up is honest and real, and that they trust you enough to answer this question. And then the second question, have you ever had to make funeral arrangements for a loved one before? A lot of times you'll know this before this point if it was for an aftercare, but ask follow-up questions. Each of these, you should be having a short conversation about each of these questions. Tell me a little bit more about that. What was that experience like for you? How often do you have one where the wife says, yes, my mother died, and the husband says, yeah, my uncle died, both within a year of each other? Well, tell me about both of those. How were they similar? How were they different? Get them to talk about that. And then if you had both passed away yesterday, this one is incredibly important because we're painting a picture, an honest picture. If you had both passed away yesterday, who would be in meeting with our funeral director today? Well, it'd be our kids. Okay, and you said you have 3 kids, right? Do they all live in the area? Would they all come together? Would they bring their spouses? We can go on and on. We've talked about the kind of follow-up questions here, but make sure to get them to understand that. And then, of course, price framing. So it sounds like both of your daughters would come in, just the 2 of them. Do you have an idea of how they would pay for that and how much it would cost? And then you just tell them, okay, and do you know what a funeral costs? No, I've heard, but I'm not really sure. No problem. Average funeral with burial in the state of California is whatever it is, 13 to 17,000. Whatever it is in your area. Don't be afraid of telling them what it is. They'll appreciate it. It gets the shock out of the way, and now you can move on. And then number 4 is part of the umbrella. So you will now be opening it to this umbrella page. You can see that. So there's a script attached to this. Look in your training manual for the full script. But the 4th question is, just so I know what's most important to you, would you mind sharing with me which of these items listed represents the most important reason each of you have chosen to meet with me today? And then allow them to both answer separately. A lot of times, and I'm sure there's the same for me and my husband, but a lot of times the women will answer for the husbands and they'll just let them. You need to stop and say, okay, Betty, thanks for sharing that with me. Fred, how about for you? Because they may have totally different reasons and you need to know what that is. And then thank them for sharing that with you, because again, it is a vulnerable space. Next step is the message to my loved ones. This is where we talk about the tone should shift a little bit. A lot of times it's very upbeat. People will be making jokes, things that way. I know Armin's on the call. He does a great job with this page. He actually has the family a lot of times read this sentence. But Bob and Mary, I just feel that this sentence here best describes the purpose of our visit here today. And then you just read it very slowly. Your tone should shift. So even how I'm speaking right now, it would be softer. So in this personal wishes guide, you will find information I have recorded and arrangements I have made in advance, hoping to relieve you of the burden of these decisions when you're under stress. Bob and Mary, what kind of experience do you think your children will have planning your funeral when they know that you've already made most of these decisions? And then let them answer. I mean, that's a pretty powerful thing to think about. You've probably never really thought about that or had to answer that question. This is where they are giving your presentation for you. These are the hardest parts of the presentation, because you're getting them to open up and to be honest and vulnerable with you. If you are successful doing that, the money will work itself out. We always talk about all the objections about the money. If they're comfortable with you and they feel safe and they're talking to you about why they really want to do this, then the only issue we have at the end is the money. That's why we have to make sure we don't rush through these steps, right? So we're back to the 0 to 100. Every single step is equally important. Now, the vital statistics page, this is a wonderful page just because we're gathering their information. But the next few pages are extremely important to get filled out first. This is the information your kids will need within a day or 2 of your death. You will need the vital statistics for the funeral director so that he can have the death certificate filed. It's common that families arrive to a funeral home without this information or just can't remember it because they're under so much stress. Always on every page, ask a question. You do not want to just be blurting out statements. So after that, an obvious question would be, have either of you ever had to fill out a death certificate for a loved one? If not, well, aren't you one of the lucky ones? What do you think that might be like? And of course, if they have, and most people have, tell me a little bit about that. Did you have all of the information? Do you feel like you were prepared? And almost always, what is the answer? No, didn't have everything. So that's a really important page to have covered. Now, the middle part of the book, or the guts of the book as we call it, is really up to you. So if you have not filled out your own book, you have homework this week to fill out your book, because there will be pages that stand out that maybe, Sherry really likes the 4th and 5th page, but Jane really loves the 7th and 8th page. Whatever it is to you that sticks out, then that's what you should talk about, because you're passionate about it and that will show. So make sure to focus on those pages, but share stories. Be aware that you're not just blurting out information about, let me tell you why this is so important. So as you're discussing the service, oh, this talks about what you'll wear. Let me tell you a story about a family I served. And it was the sweetest thing because mom had picked out this dress that meant so much to them. It was the dress that she had worn to her son's wedding. And they didn't even know that she had kept it. And it was in the closet and they found it, and to see her in it was just so powerful and moving to the family. Whatever it is, share it with a story. Don't just say, boy, it's important that you pick out your clothing. Make sure you know what you're going to wear. So have stories to share and then follow it up with a question. I included a few examples of questions here, but have you ever had to write an obituary for a loved one? I said loved one. That's wrong. How was that experience for you? Talk to them about that. Have you thought about what you'll wear? How about jewelry? I love you have the beautiful wedding ring. Mary, have you thought about that? What would you like to have happen during the visitation with your wedding ring? And then tell me about your thoughts for pallbearers. You can choose honorary pallbearers. Get them talking to you. They'll open up to you. Make sure you're not just lecturing them about the importance of the pages. Choose no more than 5 to 6 pages to focus on, and you should not spend more than 2 minutes on one page. So be very aware of that. People have only so much of an emotional bandwidth. If we spend too much energy discussing each page of the book, by the time we get to the pie chart and the pricing, they will. Have you ever had anyone that was just physically exhausted by the end? You just felt like they just didn't have any energy left to go. It may be that we're spending too much time in the book. I've had that happen. So you've got to find ways to shorten that and keep them engaged on each page. Now, the easy way, hard way page might be one of the most uncomfortable pages of the book, but that's because it's probably the most important page. So we've built the relationship of trust. They've been open and vulnerable with us. It is very important now that we get them to confirm in their own words that, yes, they would prefer to pre-plan. So the truth is, Bob and Mary, there are only 2 ways we can handle the loss of a loved one. It can be done when the time comes out of necessity, when decisions are made alone from an emotional place of grief and uncertainty, or we can do things ahead of time when it's a matter of choice, and we have the peace of mind of comfortably making these decisions together. Based on what you've shared with me, it sounds like you agree that making these decisions in advance makes the most sense for you. Is that correct? And just allow them to respond. There's a longer version, and frankly, it's better. I just shortened it for this, of this script that talks about, Bob and Mary, how long have you been married? Wow, you've probably made a lot of decisions together. That is in the training manual, and I would encourage you to memorize that one as well. But it's important that we cover this page. If their response is, well, sure, but we don't know if we can afford it, that's awesome. That's actually the response we want. We want to know that their only question or concern at this point is money, that they agree conceptually that they would like to pre-plan. It's going to be a little uncomfortable, and that's okay. But the more uncomfortable this page is, the less uncomfortable asking for the money is, because you've now isolated out that that's the only question. So it would only make sense that you would ask for the money. Does that make sense, everyone? Okay. So once they say, well, sure, of course we'd like to if we can, or yeah, we would definitely want to get this done. We don't want to leave it to our kids. Great. Then I'd like to show you this pie chart, which is a visual breakdown of all the decisions that we'll make together today. Our objective now is for you to know exactly how much your own funeral would cost if something happened tomorrow. Sound fair? And then we're showing them the pie chart. So we're asking for permission. We talk about this a lot. How long does a book take? It only takes 15 to 20 minutes. We always ask for permission to proceed. No one says no, because of course they do want to know, but now we're proceeding into the pie chart, which is making those decisions. So I just did a little graphic here of the pie chart. The key here, I can't overemphasize this enough, is just to keep it simple. It's easy to think that if we educate them about every type of casket and the difference between 20 gauge and 18 gauge and stainless steel and bronze, they'll just be so enamored by how wise and brilliant we are that they'll buy. It does not. Good news for all of us, it doesn't work that way. You don't have to know everything about every piece of the merchandise. In fact, the opposite is probably true. Keep it simple. If they feel overwhelmed or confused at all, they will not make a decision. I mean, every single time, if they're overwhelmed or confused, so we have to be aware. If they say, well, okay, why don't we just move on to the next one? Because you can tell they can't make a decision, they're confused, you've got to slow it down and back up. So try to offer no more than 3 to 5 choices per section, and then always use an alternative choice. So most of you are familiar with the some, many others. It's a kind of a sales approach. So I used an example here with a vault. So Bob and Mary, cemeteries require vaults. That's usually all you need to say. If they have do you know what a vault is? They'll say yes, great. We don't need to go into any more detail about that. So here's a few options. You'll have a visual chart if you have one. If not, ask your funeral home, they'll have one. So Bob and Mary, some families choose our bronze vault at $4,200. Many choose this reinforced vault at $2,100. Others choose our basic concrete vault at $1,600. Which would you prefer? That's it. It's not, do you want to pick out a vault today? What do you think of vaults? Do you want to have a long discussion about the importance of vaults or the history of vaults? Nope, just cemeteries require vaults, some, many others. It's just very simple. And then almost always they'll pick the middle or the low end, which is fine. And then you write it on the cost estimate, and we're moving right along to the next section of the pie. It's important here to be an advisor and make suggestions based on your prior conversation. They should feel at the end of each one of these sections of the pie that a final decision has been made. We are not having a general discussion about options that we're going to revisit down the road. Once we have discussed the burial vault, we write an X on the chart. You have a printed out version. Wonderful. That's a concrete vault. That's 1600, moving right along. They should understand in their head that a decision has now been made about that section of the pie chart. So we now move to the cost estimate. That's the funeral protection plan. Once you're done with the pie chart, you go to the cost estimate. After you've guided the family through making the decisions of the pie chart, write their choices directly on the funeral protection plan. It should be clear enough that they could explain it to someone else down the road. Be aware of that. Sometimes the actual paperwork can be a little confusing. So we want the cost estimate to be very clear. Add both columns together and then total both plans. You want to tell them the amount and then pause. Always here, speak very slowly. Do not rush through this part of it because they're trying to understand a lot of information and make a big decision. So Bob and Mary, the total investment for funeral services and merchandise that you've selected is $14,995. Take a breath, and then you move on to the closing section. So we're explaining very simply, keep it less than 3 to 4 lines here. Bob and Mary, this is where most people ask about their options to pay for this. Funeral homes can't use or hold your money for funeral services until the time of passing. But your money is held in an insurance vehicle. This is a protection for you if anything were ever to happen to the funeral home you chose or if you move out of the area. What's also nice is it gives you the option to either pay in full or make payments over time, whichever makes most sense for you. So I'm going to give you your payment options and you just tell me what's most comfortable. Now, many families take care of this in one single investment. Is that something you'd be comfortable with today? If they say no, no problem. I understand, no problem. These are the other options. How old are you today, Mr. Jones? You don't ask for permission to calculate. We're just being very assumptive here. Great, Mr. Jones, how old are you today? 62. Break eye contact, start figuring. Take a breath, take your time. Don't feel like you have to rush through this part of it. Once you're done with those options, you're simply writing it down. So over 3 years, it'll be $525 a month. 5 years is $410 a month, or 7 years is $242 a month, which is most comfortable for you. This is probably the hardest part in your first year or so of this, but you have to be just cool as a cucumber and you'll feel the opposite of that, and that's okay. But if your body language, or if you turn, like I tend to turn red and get like excited if I get nervous. And so I have to be very aware of my breathing, take deep breaths, don't start sweating profusely. If they sense that you're nervous here, that will transfer to them and now they'll be nervous. So it's just very matter of fact. You've already had the hard conversations, remember. Now it's just, so 3 years is this, 5 years is this, 7 years is 242, which is most comfortable for you. And then just pause. We at ICC say we talked about this. Almost every person that discussed closing up on stage at some point in their presentation, I don't use this language in my normal life, but at some point we all said, shut up. And it's as much for me as it was for everyone. I had to remind myself to just stop talking. It was uncomfortable because you want to fill that space, but just stop talking. Which is most comfortable for you?
Aaron always tells me to shut up.
Shut up, Michael. Yeah.
So she asks you for money and then she tells you to shut up. Those are the 2 steps in the process, right?
Yeah, Travis is ordering pizza, Michael. I need $20. Shut up. Right.
Open your wallet and shut up.
Yeah. And then I just get West's wallet and then I don't even ask, right? Okay, so as soon as they respond with I don't know. I mean, we may be able to do $410 a month. Wonderful. I have a little paperwork to complete. We are just transitioning right to the paperwork. Okay. And then the Grandchild Writer is such an amazing closing tool. If you're not using this, I can't tell you, it changed my life when I started using it. Can you just help me? I know you said you have 12 grandchildren. Can you just list their first and last name, I'll explain a little bit more of that in a minute. Now, Mr. Jones, what's your full legal name? Or what's your birth date? What's your mailing address? Remind me we were going to do the blue casket, not the brown casket. Whatever, just have a whole set of questions you can now start asking to transition to the paperwork. And then now we're transitioning to the paperwork. This part, if you have done the rest of it and asked the really hard questions, you'll be surprised at how easy and smooth the actual close asking for the money becomes. It just takes practice and a little professional courage, like Michael talks about. So you want to have your paperwork in a specific order. We can talk to you more about that individually, but you don't want to be ruffling through a bunch of paperwork trying to find the grandchild rider, for example. You want to have it there ready, and then always have a backup set of paperwork. If you're like me, it'll only take one time that you make a mistake and you don't have another goods and services, and you have to call your friend to bring you some paperwork, and you're out in the middle of nowhere. So always have, that actually happened, by the way. I can't remember who brought it, but thank you, whoever it was. So you just want to have backup sets of paperwork with you. And then let them know, say, thank you, Bob and Mary. This will take a few minutes. If you have anything you want to get done, I'm going to fill this out. Don't rush through, and don't feel like you have to be talking to them while you're filling it out, because you're just going to make mistakes. Don't be afraid of silence at this point. Okay, so that's the paperwork. And then referrals. So show that, this is interesting. We have this in the book. It may actually be higher than this, but this was the article we saw when we printed the training manual. It shows that 52% of your families would provide you with names of people who may be interested, but only 5% are being asked. So very few of our families are ever even being asked for referrals. And quite frankly, I was the same way. Sometimes it's just, you forget, right? We just have to get in the habit of asking. But at least half the time, they will know someone that would be interested in a personal wishes organizer. Now, they may not give you the name today. They may say, do you mind if it's my neighbor, I just want to talk to him first? Sure, no problem. I'll follow back up. That's fine. And that's whether they buy or don't. In a way, you almost have guilt on your side if they don't buy, because now they just spent all your time, and you could get some really valuable referrals if they don't buy. So the key is just to find people that want the book, not people who want to buy. And then the warm down. We don't spend a lot of time talking about this, but this is really critical. And we're almost done. This is the last step of the 100%, right? So the warm down begins after the paperwork is done and put away. So we've thanked them. We've done everything. Wow, how are you going to feel once this is tell your kids this is done? Great. That's not the warm down. That's finishing up the paperwork. Now the paperwork is done. Remember back in the warm-up, we had to get out of the weeds because they were telling us about their senior softball league they just joined and the friends they met. Now tell me more about that senior softball league you joined. Tell me more about the Elks Club you're a part of. Tell me more about your church. You said you joined the choir. Whatever it is, talk about anything other than business. And your warm down should be at least as long as your warm-up was. I know you've got other places to go. Your phone's been ringing. WhatsApp has been buzzing. Travis won't stop calling you. You've got places to go. But you've got to just put it away. Spend at least 5 to 10 minutes in the warm down. They have to know that you still care about them once you've gotten the sale. And just ask them questions about them. This is my favorite part. This is when they'll take you upstairs and show them the model train collection upstairs, whatever it is. And then 2 things you have to do after every single sale, every single time. We pride ourselves here on a really low cancellation rate. My persistency was about 93% once I figured things out. When I first started, it was just above 80%. I had some cancellations my first year, and I figured it out pretty quickly. That I did 2 things. I always called them within 24 hours. And I have what I said here. You can say whatever is comfortable. But Bob, I just want to call and let you and Mary know how much I enjoyed our visit yesterday. I know we covered a lot of information. I just wanted to see if you had any questions after I left. Now, I can think of at least 8 to 10 times. Yeah, actually, I was figuring out, guess what they say? How much is this going to cost me? If I go over 10 years, of course we talked about it. Of course I told them. But there was a lot of information. Great, I'm glad you asked. Let me explain that to you again. If they're calling you with that question and they're already defensive, it's a lot harder to handle than if you're calling them, letting them know that you're there to answer that. If they really don't understand it, I got in my car, I drove back out, I explained it again in person. I almost never lost a sale to that because I called them the next day. Always make a call within 24 hours. And then I did a handwritten thank you card. I learned this from Vicki, who's on our team. She still does this. A lot of people even do this for no sales, but people really appreciate that. And there's not a lot of people that are doing handwritten cards. I wrote in here what I wrote in my cards. You can write what's comfortable for you. But Bob and Mary, thank you for taking the time to meet with me last week. It was truly a pleasure getting to know both of you. We're honored that you have chosen Mark and More Choy to serve you and your family's needs. Please know we're here if you ever need anything at all. Feel free to call me directly at my number if you have any questions. Thank you again. I wish you all the best. And then I would always do a PS with a personal note. So I hope all goes well with your dog surgery. I can't wait to hear about your trip to Hawaii. You know, whatever it is that something personal you discussed, put a little note about at the bottom. Okay, so now I'm going to bring this back up, this graphic, so you can kind of see. So we've covered now everything from the warm up all the way to the warm down and everything in between. So if you get out of an appointment and you feel like you did everything really well and you didn't get the sale and you know they had the money and you know they wanted to do it when you got there, print this out and be really honest with yourself about what did I maybe skip that would have made a difference if I hadn't. So, okay, so I'm going to open it up. I'll unmute everyone here. Oh, and it looks like there's a question. Any questions or thoughts from anyone?
John commented that he really liked your, I'm guessing it's your phone call and also your thank you card notation. That's about the time it came in. So.
Oh, thanks, John.
Does I like that? I'm using that from now on.
Oh, good. I hope you do. I stole it from someone else, so you can steal it from us. Oh, there's a couple other ones. Oh, Cindy, yeah. Yeah, thanks. We'll send this out. We've recorded it. We'll send it to you. Any questions from anyone about this or thoughts about things that maybe you know you're doing every time or anything you're seeing, if you want to be honest, that maybe you've forgotten about over?
I'll just add two things, Erin, and she brought them up in the beginning, but I can't emphasize enough the importance of completing your own personal wishes organizer. It's amazing to me. In fact, as she was doing that and I thought of that question, I think it's been several years since I've actually filled one out. So I'm going to take on that homework challenge myself as she The cool thing is now is that if you remember, you now have a fillable PDF version of this that you can just do from your computer. You don't need to write in a book if you don't want to. For me, writing things for a long period of time, I get my hand starts doing this because I don't write very often. But now I can jump to my computer and I can fill out my own book. If you haven't filled out your own book, I don't want to call you out on it, but here you are telling me how important this is and how valuable it is and how priceless it is when it's filled out and it's completed, and you yourself haven't filled out the book. It's just, you probably want to question how much you believe in what you're doing. So please fill out your own book. And you'll use statements like when when I filled out my book or when I filled out this page, I didn't realize that these were some of the decisions, or I didn't realize I hadn't even thought about what type of music I wanted to have. Like, think about that. Well, what do I want to wear? And then when I went through my wife's book and I read what she put in her book, I would have gotten things way off. So I'm so glad that I had her fill one out too. So again, it's just an homework assignment for you, but also to maybe sit with your spouse and fill out a book together, because you'll have your own stories to tell if you do that. I've never thought about that. I don't have any idea what kind of flowers that I'd want. So that you can't tell those experiences unless you go through it yourself. The other thing that Vicki does, one of our counselors, and we've shared this before, but I'll share it again, is that she actually takes her personal book out and presents from that. So as opposed to bringing out a blank book, she has her own book filled out, and she actually says, to show you the value of this book and how much I believe in it and how important it is to me and the way it's going to help my family. This is my personal book that I have filled out. And so then she's going through, and she's actually going through her own book, and she has to fill it out every year or so because it gets kind of beat up and tattered. And she has a little thing where she puts some envelopes to her children in the back of the book, where she's got a personal letter to each of them, kind of adds this emotional value. So that's another option for you. We've shared that many times. but that another idea of going about this is to complete your book and then actually use it to present from. And then of course you're leaving them blank books for them to keep. But again, that adds, I believe in what I'm doing. I believe so strongly in this book that I'm going to share mine with you. And that, you know, as I filled it out myself, and then you can share someone's experience. So 2 things there, but the most important, the first is you got to fill out a book for yourself, and you can use the fillable PDF version and save it to your computer. At least then you'll have the experience of filling it out. And if you're married, I would encourage you to do the same with your spouse, because you'll also learn some things there that you can then share with your clients. When doing this together with my wife or with my husband, this is what we came across, right? We didn't have any idea about these things and how difficult it would have been had we not had the opportunity to have this discussion ahead of time. So then it makes it very, very personal to you, and they're going to be able to experience the same thing.
Yep. Yeah, great. John has a question, kind of different, but about kids wanting to cancel on behalf of their parents. Is that what you're saying, John? The kids found out mom and dad did it and want to cancel?
Yeah, so what I have is when the parents go back, usually with people that are over 80, they go back and share that with their kid, and then they think that they pay too much because they start looking on the internet and they see other funeral homes that charge probably half of what I'm charging, and then they try to tell their parents that you pay too much, you could have gotten that cheaper somewhere else, and so that's a situation I'm dealing with today. I invited one of the daughters of someone I signed up on Friday to come over. She's coming in at 3 p.m. So I can explain all that to her here. But yeah, that's something that I'm seeing, and I'm relating it to the subject because it's one of those things that happen after you close a contract.
Right.
That, yes, you can call the person and tell them, I'm happy you did this, and it was great meeting you. But it was great meeting you. But then they go to their kids, and you don't have a relationship with them. You haven't established a rapport with them.
Right. So
Sorry, a little distracting here.
I'll go on this
go ahead, Mike.
if I can.
Yeah.
So I think you're handling it right to start by inviting the daughter in. I mean, that's really the best way to tackle this, just head on, by saying, yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to go over what's been done with you, ma'am, and explain the contract to her. It's almost like you're going to have to sell the daughter as well, but at this point, it's kind of what needs to be done to save the contract. So I think that's the best course of action. Just be prepared for them to have their own objections and questions about what's been done. But I think with, just a lot of it is, and just selling in general to the client is them knowing you and trusting you and liking you. That's why people buy from you. So if you can do that for the daughter as well, I think you won't have any problems saving the contract, unless there is some huge discrepancy as far as what she's found on the internet with price. Then you can obviously tackle that with how White Emerson, your location, is different than the location they're bringing up, or things like that. So there may be some navigating tough waters, but it's definitely doable. And I think with the personality that you have, it should be pretty easy.
Right.
I'll add to that too. This is probably most common with cremation families. As far as posting prices online, low-cost cremation providers openly post their prices, and so that's where this kind of comes up at times. What said, that a lot of these low-cost cremation places, you don't want to necessarily, from a professional business perspective, you're not going to necessarily talk bad about them, but you do want to, talk about definitely the value of White Emerson Mortuary. Have you been to the and then the other thing too that sometimes I lead off with, and it has to be worded in the right way. But this is something a question that I asked. But I would, John, and this is a great question to ask them when you're face to face. But just before we get started, getting the absolute cheapest price for your mother's cremation, the only thing that's important to you. Are there other things that are important to you as well? And they'll say, no, I'm not looking for the cheapest price. These things are important to me too. Well, let me share with you what we provide and why we're a little bit more than the competition. You got a beautiful funeral home where they're probably going to go to a storefront someplace else. You've got a beautiful chapel and facilities and staff, and your mother will never leave our care because we handle all the cremations here, and you add this value to that, it is a little bit more, but this is the reason why. But almost always when you say, is getting the best price the only thing that will almost result in a no? Like, no. Well, okay, well, what else is, when you're choosing a funeral home or a cremation plan for your mother, what else is important to you? Well, I want to make sure that the people can be trusted, and I want to make sure they've been in business a while, and I want to make sure, and then you could say, well, that's us. Like, that's what we provide. And I can't speak to my competitors, but I know a lot of them operate differently than we do, and this is what sets us apart. And oftentimes, as Michael and Aaron have both just shared.
Right. And I agree with all of that. I would also try to get the parents to be there again, because if you can get mom to say in her own words why she would prefer to have White Emerson, because what happens is the daughter's trying to be the hero to save mom some money, whatever, coming from a good place. But if they, hold on, okay, unmute yourselves if you want to chat. There was just some background noise. If you can get mom to say, well, I know it's a little bit more, honey, but whatever it is that's important to her, I think that's also powerful. And Sherry had a good comment. She said at a past business, if you get the sense when you're meeting with them, and sometimes there's no way to know, but if you get the sense that the children will be decision makers, if they are older, then you just try your best maybe to see if the kids could be present for that meeting. But it sounds like you're doing everything that you can right now to get them to come back in, John. Any other questions or thoughts from anyone?
By the way, would you send that out via WhatsApp or whatever and tell us how that goes when you meet with them today?
Muted. Yeah,
Okay.
thumbs up. Thanks, John. Okay.
I really like this graphic that Sierra did. That looks really great. Tell her thank you.
Yeah,
That looks awesome.
I will. It's really good. Again, it's just visual. And it's nice, I'd encourage you just to all do a printout of this and have it in your folder, your goal journal, and after each appointment, just, before you go in and after you leave, just say, okay, you know what, I know I'm really good at the value statement and referral, but I'm skipping the umbrella page, or maybe I'm skipping the easy way, hard way page. It's just, if we're honest, we all have our strengths and weaknesses, and if we can be honest with ourselves about where we can improve, it's back to that 0 to 100. We get so close. Sometimes we're 93% of the way there and we just skip one little thing. And think of how hard it is to finally get in front of that family. Just make sure you're doing everything you can. So we'll send this out. We'll send out the recording as well as the Word document with the notes and then this graphic. But if anyone has any question or wants any kind of additional input or thoughts about any piece of it, just let us know. I won't tell you to shut up. Okay. Good. All right. If there's no more questions, we'll wish you all luck today. If you need anything, let us know. Good luck, John. Looks like Melanie has an appointment too. So good luck to Melanie if she's already hopped off. So, okay. Bye, everyone.
Good job, everybody. Thanks. Good to see you. Have a great week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.